you must be very excited about all these revelations of classified documents being strewn all over Biden world, right? That must be that one of these cases, right? Isn't this a palace coup? Isn't this the deep state deciding they've had enough of Joe Biden? It's time to set up for the succession. Isn't that really what's going on here?
This is a theory that many people are proposing. I don't see any evidence that that's happening. Look,
I also find it utterly implausible.
Yeah. Look,
Again,
I mean, this is not the instrument they'd use for a palace coup if they wanted to bring down Joe Biden, right? What would they do? Here's what, if you wanted to bring down Joe Biden, if you were the Democratic Party, right? If you were the progressive forces, you would stick a dozen trans activists in a room with Biden before he takes his afternoon nap, right? He would invariably dead name at least half a dozen. You report that, and boom, Biden's out.
Well,
right?
not only that, just open up the FBI files.
Well, I mean, but
it's history of corruption. I mean, it's
but that would implicate a whole bunch of other people, and that's what I mean.
Right,
Here's the issue with the documents.
Yeah.
This is a problem for them.
Hey, Culminators, guess what? It's episode number 3. But Ron, you already did 100 episodes. No, it's number 3 of Lee Smith. Okay, that's a separate track that we have. The thing with Lee Smith is you can talk to him every week, and there's so much going on. There's so much that he's covering. And guess what? The news makes it easy to be Lee Smith because there's always something outrageous going on, and he knows where to find those buried bodies. Lee, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
Ron, thank you for that really generous and fun introduction. I'm doing great, and I'm always better whenever I'm speaking with you, and I'm before the ColemanNation. How's that?
Oh, well, the joke here is ColemanNation, not ColemanNation, but certainly America is my nation.
Yeah.
And if it wants to be my nation as well, in that sense, it's welcome to. I first thought, I mean, listen, like I said, I would have you on every week if I could, but what first got simulated, there are a lot of simulations going on, but what first stimulated me at this particular time to invite you was when I took a gander at this in Tablet magazine, and they make Tablet is so goofy. Look what they do to they don't want you to read their thing on a PC. I mean, why do I want a full-size picture of this scumbag? Okay, James Baker. How the FBI hacked Twitter. This is a story of great importance to America, also to me professionally, because this ties in with our lawsuit about state-based censorship of Twitter on behalf of DC Drano, which is before the Ninth Circuit right now. Sorry about that. So let's talk a little bit about that. That's already from January 5th. So by the time people see this, it'll be about a month-old story. But you really dug down here, and it seems to me that a really comprehensive treatment of the extent to which the deep state and the intelligence community, as it likes to call itself, has essentially captured social media, and Twitter in particular.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you said so-called intelligence community, or something as it likes to call itself. I don't call it that anymore. That's much too friendly a term.
That's why I qualify it that way.
I mean, right now, I just say intelligence services, spy services. That gives a better indication. Unfortunately, that we usually use those modifiers to talk about hostile services, but that's unfortunately what the FBI and our other agencies have become, hostile to at least half of the country. Yeah, what what Elon Musk and Matt Taibbi are doing is very important, providing this information, giving some great insight into into how Twitter was basically captured by the services. What I wanted to do is I wanted to take it further back and say that this has been going on for a while. And there are more. It's an enormous story, as you know. We've a gentleman on Twitter, or a Twitter account, name redacted, has been posting just fantastic stuff, the person just goes through LinkedIn profiles and has identified
Yeah, that was amazing.
hundreds of hundreds of intelligence officers who are now at Google, Facebook. So it's a very broad thing. What what Matt Taibbi and what Elon Musk have done is to give more insight into actually what they're doing at the social media platforms like Twitter.
This process began during the Obama era.
Yeah, it's very important, I think, to see how Barack Obama basically captured big tech, right? For a lot of reasons, and finance as well, right? This is some of what happened after the financial crisis, and Barack Obama and the Democratic Party looked indomitable. And of course, it was the Obama administration that was willing to threaten to regulate the social media platforms, and they continue to do it today, continue to threaten the social media platforms. They will destroy their financial models if they don't play along. And what that means is censoring. Primarily, it means censoring their opponents, but there's a lot of other stuff going on too. As I go through in this piece, I also explain how they're using some of the social media platforms basically as a collection device too, to be able to collect on their political opponents. So it's really an enormously valuable instrument for the intelligence services. And this partly explains why everyone is losing their mind about Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. Because with this, the FBI and other intelligence agencies lost a very, very powerful and important tool.
Well, more than losing a tool, they also left behind, notwithstanding the efforts of James Baker and many others, obviously, but they left behind all kinds of fingerprints.
Yeah. I don't think, my opinion is that I don't think they're that concerned about it, because they'll never pay a price for it. I think it's important to see what we've all been going through the last several years. Certainly became more noticeable during the Trump era, is that there's a psychological operation after psychological operation. So the idea that they left a whole bunch of evidence about how they're messing with with presidential elections, I think they're happy with that, because that's part of a psychological operation. Here's how powerful we are. Here's what we're doing. And there's nothing you can do about it. What can you do to stop it? You got your Republican president, Donald Trump. No one's been held accountable. Not Michael Sussman, not Igor Danchenko. Never mind the top names at the FBI, like Andrew McCabe, James Comey, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page. You can't do anything about it. Go ahead and cry in your little conservative corner. We'll get back to you when we want to put you in jail.
Well, I mean, the only problem with that hypothesis is that it is impossible. It's impossible to falsify. If they wanted to leave it, then it's because they wanted to leave it. And if they didn't want to leave it, then no, how would we would have no way of knowing the difference. All things being equal, Lee, and you certainly have enough background, and it's kind of funny because I've been reading the George Smiley novels recently, and in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, it's all about how he unwinds the progress of a mole in the British Secret Service, and he uses a great deal of inductive logic. See, what was it that they didn't want us to know? I think because my next question to you had been, if they're going ballistic because they've lost this resource, why do they let it happen? So one of the answers by your lights would be, well, they didn't really care. In other words, why did the government let it happen? Because the government didn't really care. But on the other hand, you're saying that it is a loss to them.
Oh no, I think the platform is a big loss to him, as a big loss to the intelligence services. but I don't think that they're concerned that it gives evidence of what they've done. I mean, the piece also talks about the election integrity project, right,
Oh,
which
that
is basically run out of DHS, and they partnered with these private sector entities, like including universities, Stanford University, their Internet Observatory Lab, University of Washington, Atlantic Council, Digital Forensic Research Lab, something like that, and also this firm called Graphica. And how do we know what DHS did? Because the Election Integrity Project was boasting about it, right? To continue to raise more funds. They're all. I think this is crucial to understand. They're boasting about what they've done, and it's not just EIP. Remember, as another part of the piece is Barack Obama is at Stanford, at University of Chicago, warning about the dangers of disinformation. So on one hand, he's getting his riling up his tech base, saying, yeah, we're gonna pay lots of money for your great work on rooting out dangerous disinformation.
and people
But
don't
everyone
realize
knows what he means by it.
FBI wrote checks to Twitter. They paid them for. I mean, they got far more than they paid for, especially with this use of. Let me ask you something about all these former employees that name redacted that so incredibly identified. Do you think that they're still officially, unofficially with the agency? Is that the deal, or are these just friendly relationships that are being? In other words, do you think they're being in any way compensated, or that they still have the sort of privileges that? In other words, are they undercover agencies essentially? Do you know?
I believe an awful lot of them still have active security clearances. James Baker did. There was at least one more person at Twitter who had an active security clearance. And in Washington, typically security clearances are very valuable, for people who move out of the government, whatever they move into in the private sector, whatever kind of contracting or consulting work they do, those clearances are worth an awful lot. And a lot of people kept those clearances when they moved to Twitter, presumably when they moved in Google as well. So yeah, in that way, I absolutely no. I certainly believe that a lot of these people were inserted into these platforms because it's a very large, it's a very large and powerful intelligence service. What they've been building over the last several years, big tech, social media, the services, and the media. It's enormous.
Would you say it's comparable to what China is doing with TikTok?
Yes, yes. The more and more, look, I'm very much against TikTok, and TikTok is clearly, it's not just a collection vehicle, right? TikTok is also, more importantly, a propaganda vehicle. The way that it shapes, the way that it shapes messages, the way that it's helping divide the country by focusing on certain issues, especially the trans issue, as the great libs of TikTok has focused on. But once we see what these American companies are doing, Twitter, Facebook, Google, we have to wonder what's upsetting the American government. Is it that they don't control TikTok, that's controlled by a rival agency, and in some cases a partner agency?
Right. I was about to say, how much of a rivalry is that now?
Right. Yeah. It's a very, this is something else that I've written about and will continue to write about, the partnership between American and Chinese Communist Party elites. So yeah, it would be good to get more insight into what the issues are with TikTok, why we have different people complaining about it.
Well, there are many competing interests, and what TikTok has done has taken a big bite out of Facebook for sure. Right? It killed Instagram. Right. I didn't kill Instagram. I'm sure Instagram is worth something still, but it has been devastating to Instagram and to Facebook, and I'm sure it's a concern for Twitter as well.
This is a great way to frame this, Ron. I hadn't thought about it exactly in this way, but this is fantastic. Because the way you can see it then, it's rival agencies fighting for social media space, right? Partly for collection purposes, partly for propaganda purposes, and partly for censorship purposes. So the idea that American agencies are fighting with CCP agencies over this space, that's a great way to put it.
It's interesting also because and this is probably a bridge too far, but I'm involved in litigation that involves YouTube channels that are operated by the Russian government, and which YouTube is currently essentially has demonetized. I think is what they've done. I don't think they've censored it because Russia is the bad guy. But we know the complications of that political calculus as well. But it might be that if we could roll things back, I actually, my client showed me information about just how important YouTube is to Russia's propaganda efforts. And now YouTube is not. There are valuable analytics available to major users, especially on YouTube. But nothing like what you get from Twitter and especially TikTok. Just one more question though about the Twitter files. I know you mentioned a couple of other things that even could segue into this, but going back to your PSYOP hypothesis, which is certainly has its appeal, and which I actually just used in remarks that I made at a group the other night, where this idea that we know you know what we're doing, and we don't care that you know. In fact, we want you to know, because that undermines your morale and your will to resist even more. But why, therefore, are the corporate media ignoring the Twitter file story?
Oh, because they're part of what I'm describing as the largest and most powerful intelligence service in the world. They're absolutely part of it.
All right, but then shouldn't they want to promote?
Oh, I see what
crow
you're saying.
about hey, FBI. Good news. FBI is controlling everything. The guys we trust the most in the world.
Yeah, no, they have a different job. They have a different audience, right? They're really addressing an elite audience, and it's a very small audience, right? CNN, Washington Post, New York Times. So no, they don't want to expose that to that readership, to that audience. They have a different message for that audience, and where they are crowing all the time about defeating MAGA, defeating conservatives, pushing back on, punching Nazis, punching fascists. So that's what's important for them. That's that different message for that audience.
Yeah. So and that adds to the to the subtlety of this. Like I said, there are many different axes that intersect, but they don't always intersect. You have your message for your elites and your message for for example, I was just watching a video about TikTok and about the Chinese, what the Chinese government does, exactly what we were saying. But of course, these elites who read the Times and the Washington Post, they're not looking at TikTok. They couldn't care less what they wouldn't know where to find it or how to. It's for very young people,
right?
It's not. But there's that cadre has to be addressed one way, and there are other cadres that have to be addressed other ways. And then there are, as you said at the very beginning, there are the finance axes, and and they're the social media axes. They're the government, the intelligence. So, and then again, there is competition, and there's financial competition. I mean, what TikTok and Instagram, and in particular, not Instagram, what TikTok and Apple have done to Facebook in the last couple of years, and then what Mark Zuckerberg has done to Facebook as well, threatens its existence, which in and of itself is probably significant for all these things.
I think what they've done to Facebook is fascinating. If you look at which I talk about in that article, the Twitter Files article, how Obama pulled Zuckerberg aside after the 2016 election, warned him about Russian disinformation, which is code word, for Donald Trump, and then he paid $400 million. I'm not defending Mark Zuckerberg by any means, but the way I understand that $400 million was he was being taxed. He was being taxed to make sure that he played along for the 2020 vote. And then in 2021, nonetheless, they send this fake whistleblower after him, Francis Haugen, this whole operation set up by Pierre Omidyar and other Democratic Party operatives to go after Mark Zuckerberg. So, and Zuckerberg has a very big problem at Facebook, right? Because his financial model depends a lot on the fact that older people are the people who look at Facebook, and they tend to be more conservative. So if Zuckerberg is going to say, I can't throw all these conservatives off my, off my site because we can't survive with that. I don't care. Figure it out. Here, we're going to keep doing this to you again and again and again until you figure it out. We don't care about you. So yeah, I think the Zuckerberg story is fascinating in that way.
It's all, it's not, it's amazing to think that Facebook has already peaked. And it is, you said older people, meaning people in their 30s.
Yeah. Right.
There's really old people like us who have accounts and poke our heads in from time to time. But, the generation of people that grew up with Facebook is probably in the 30s. And the success curve and the dominance curve is so short now, right? This was something that just came onto the scene 15, 20 years ago. And now, it's facing obsolescence. Because of, the money and the technological problems and, as you mentioned, these political problems. Let's shift, because you've got a whole bunch of things going on.
Well, you and I always have lots of great stuff to talk about.
Because we're both crazy conspiracy theories, of course. And
that's true. That is true. Yeah.
But you mentioned that there was actually something that you thought was a good segue from this.
Well, I think we're talking about the FBI. Look, because one of my cases with that story and tablet is that Russiagate is the template for everything now, right? You bring in it's about big tech, social media, the press, political operatives on the Democratic Party side for the most part, as well as the national security establishment. And so that's the foundations that Russia has created for interminable information operations targeting America. So we saw recently with the arrest of this gentleman, Charles McGonagall, the former head of counterintelligence, the FBI's New York field office, we saw again another extension of Russiagate. And I have to say, I find this story very, very fishy for a whole bunch of different reasons, not least because in the middle of it is Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska, whom the FBI has been trying to court well over a decade. So again, when we're looking at the news, I think one of the things that you and I really enjoy doing, Ron, is saying like, well, what's going on here? Because this story, the way it's being told, doesn't make sense. There seems to be something else going on here.
That's right. I mean, the only thing that has made that particularly interesting, and I want to get to this in a little bit, is that I think it's not just you and I anymore who are having that reaction. I do think it's creeping, maybe not to the Facebook crowd, but and certainly not to the New York Times crowd, but I do think that's beginning to dribble down quite a bit. But so here's the story, right? January 23rd, just a couple of days ago, former special agent in charge of FBI counterintelligence charged with violating U.S. sanctions on Russia. Russia.
Yeah.
What do you think is going on here? Or
what he did was he was working to get sanctions relieved on a gentleman named Oleg Deripaska, an oligarch. And we've seen the way that Mr. Deripaska has been described in the prestige press for many years now, an oligarch close to Vladimir Putin. Well, look, if a guy's making a lot of money, if a guy's making billions of dollars and he lives in Russia, he's going to have some sort of a positive relationship with Vladimir Putin. That's just the way it works. Does that mean that he's Putin's best pal? Who knows? But the FBI has been trying to recruit Deripaska for a very long time. In the mid-2000s, when the FBI was under Robert Mueller, the FBI went to Deripaska and asked Deripaska to fund an investigation to find a former FBI agent, retired FBI agent, who was on a mission for the CIA, and he was being held in Iran. So Mueller's FBI and a team apparently reportedly led by Andrew McCabe went to Deripaska and asked him to fund this investigation. And Deripaska wound up spending $25 million. Now, the really funky thing about this is everyone knew at the time where Levinson was. He was in Iran. So what was it that Deripaska was paying here? What was that $25 million spent on? There's lots of questions that need to be asked about that. Then let's remember also, Oleg Deripaska was paying Christopher Steele, right? This was the man that was writing the Trump Russia dossier that the FBI opened up, or that gave the FBI rationale to spy on the Trump campaign. So Deripaska is in the middle of House. Right, exactly. Not just the campaign, the transition team, and the Trump White House. Right. That's Christopher Steele, who's being paid by Oleg Deripaska at the time. So you see what I'm saying? When Deripaska's name shows up again in the middle of this, there's something that isn't right, right? They're making Deripaska out to be this entirely sinister figure. And because one of the former FBI guys was working for Deripaska, that's trouble, and we're going to arrest him. When the FBI has had the FBI tried to recruit Deripaska as a confidential human source. So the idea now that this is all turned around will leave a lot of readers and a lot of people in ColemanNation, I believe, feeling like there's something funky going on here.
Well, there is, and a lot, one of the things, when you say we're reading things and we're asking why, what's really going on here, we're seeing alignments, juxtapositions that are not what we expect them to be. As you said, they must have, someone decided this guy is simply, that Deripaska is not going to work with us. He's not going to be what we hoped for. So it's time to burn McGonagall. Why? As a way of getting at Deripaska. Now,
right. I think partly is a way of getting at him and partly a way of getting at McGonagall. There's so much about this story that we need to know. I don't know if you saw, but Sergei Millian, who was a guy who they attacked over Russiagate, both Fusion GPS and the FBI were accusing him of all sorts of things. And Sergei tweeted something very interesting. He said, "Yeah, John Durham should go and interview McGonagall right now."
Oh yeah, John
see
Durham.
If McGonagall is willing to talk about the different stuff that was coming out of not only the New York office, but of course the Washington field office and Washington, D.C. headquarters. The FBI went after McGonagall, not saying he's a good guy for what he did, but Durham should. If Durham is still on the job, Durham should indeed go and speak to McGonagall and see if he's willing to talk about his now former FBI colleagues.
Well, so there's that angle. And then there's the fact that once you charge somebody criminally, you are opening yourself up to a criminal defense lawyer. And it's true that, for example, if these charges against McGonagall, I see here that this comes from Maine justice, right? But no, it seems to have this was Southern District of New York.
He was charged in Washington and New York as well. Two different cases. The Washington case is another weird case.
So both the U.S. District of Washington and the Southern District of New York are districts where the judges are dependable and trustworthy, never to do anything that could possibly disturb the deep state.
All right.
This we know. Certainly Washington. It's not even a part of the judicial branch. It's part of the executive branch. I mean, what they've done with January 6th, what they did to General Flynn, nothing. There's nothing that they're ashamed about or embarrassed. That's an example. And the judiciary, the best of this, of your maxim. This is what we're doing, and you can't do a damn thing about it.
Right.
That should be emblazoned on all the courthouses, actually, instead of
that's right.
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 And the Southern District of New York, not so different. Lots and lots of secret proceedings taking place in that court. as well that that we never hear about, and lots of dependable liberal judges. Having said that, depending on who he engages for his criminal defense lawyer, that person could make a lot of noise and a lot of trouble. But there's a point of, as long as your judges agree to seal things and agree to send people out of the courtroom during, certain moments, and meanwhile you put somebody in custody, in protective custody. After all, he's FBI. We wouldn't want him to get hurt in prison, right?
I think that the fate of the republic now depends in large part on us understanding where we are as a country, and understand that we're in what I would call a regime period, by which I mean much of the constitutional order is now in ruins, and we have to understand who we're ruled by and the nature of these people, and we have to drive them harder against each other. If there are different opportunities to do that, we absolutely have to take advantage of it. And I think we can take advantage of it in all sorts of ways, but we need to understand where we are, right? When we hear news of the 87,000 IRS agents that they're going to arm, like, wow, perfect. They're going to arm them? That's fantastic. We should put them all in the same building and find a way for them to compete against each other, because what they're building is a sectarian society, right? And sectarian societies eat each other. We need for these people to eat themselves. So if there's a way that McGonagall is going to spill the beans on other FBI agents, that's an enormous win for us. Or even right now, they might be nervous about it. All the whistleblowers that we hear are coming to, Congressman Jordan at the House Judiciary Committee. That's fantastic. I don't really believe that the FBI is going to be reformed into this wonderful federal law enforcement agency. But what's happening is now there are all sorts of people looking over their shoulders. They don't know who to trust anymore, because there are whistleblowers who are coming forward and talking to other people. So even though as an institution, their idea is you can't do anything about what we're doing, these institutions also have different segments and different components, and they need to be driven against each other. They need to eat each other from the inside out. And so that's why I think that it's important to pay attention to this news about the McGonagall arrest. I continue to maintain my optimism that good things may come of it, and and that this is, again, the future of the republic depends on whether or not we can successfully help drive these sectarian forces against each other before they have a chance to turn their full attention on us.
So therefore, you must be very excited about all these revelations of classified documents being strewn all over Biden world, right? That must be that one of these cases, right? Isn't this a palace coup? Isn't this the deep state deciding they've had enough of Joe Biden? It's time to set up for the succession. Isn't that really what's going on here?
This is a theory that many people are proposing. I don't see any evidence that that's happening. Look,
I also find it utterly implausible.
Yeah. Look, again, I mean, this is not the instrument they'd use for a palace coup if they wanted to bring down Joe Biden, right? What would they do? Here's what, if you wanted to bring down Joe Biden, if you were the Democratic Party, right? If you were the progressive forces, you would stick a dozen trans activists in a room with Biden before he takes his afternoon nap, right? He would invariably dead name at least half a dozen. You report that, and boom, Biden's out.
Well, not only that, just open up the FBI files.
Well, I mean, but
it's history of corruption. I mean, it's
but that would implicate a whole bunch of other people, and that's what I mean.
Right.
Here's the issue with the documents.
Yeah.
This is a problem for them, and we know it's a problem for them because of the forces that have been mustered here. If you look everywhere you go, there's an Obama lawyer now defending Joe Biden. It's not just Bob Bauer, right? We also had a woman named Dana Remus who served as Biden's counsel, White House counsel, but before she also was Michelle Obama's counsel. She was general counsel for the Obama Foundation. Barack married her, officiated at her wedding. So if you look closely, there are Obama people all over here. For whatever reason, the Obama and Obama figures are very concerned about what's happening here with Biden. Look, just very quickly, the other piece of evidence suggesting it's not a palace coup is, remember, this was an instrument that they were going to use to charge Donald Trump. They're psychopaths. They still may try to, but they've certainly blunted that, or that instrument has been blunted by revelations of Joe Biden holding lots of classified documents.
Right. I mean, that the idea that they would somehow use this as some form of equivalence to say, well, if we're going to go after Biden and thereby get rid of him, and that also gives us the bona fides to go after Trump. It's a really that would be a really risky strategy.
Yeah,
because you'll have thrown your own controlled guy under the bus,
right?
And which, as you say, could have been done a million other ways.
Yeah.
In order to make the much less likely leap, it's sort of like what they did with Joe Piscopo, right? I'll tell you what, I'm gonna resign, because that's what you do when someone accuses you of pawing a girl. Okay, Trump, it's your turn. Are you out of your mind?
Yeah,
Are you nuts? So it's a crazy strategy. It really, that argument never made any sense to me either. All right, so you've identified that that the Obama people are worried, but why is the FBI? Why are they even allowing this to happen? The FBI doesn't act against Democrats unless they're given permission. Why were they given permission?
Because they're worried about one thing. Remember that the president has given access to all of his working and living spaces to a drug addict with a money problem who left his laptop at a computer repair store that gave evidence of the entire First Family's corruption. So the idea somehow, they don't know what Hunter Biden might do. That's why there's urgency to find all these things. They could have buried them, right? But even if you look at how the story was
apparently
first
they buried
leaked,
they buried them through the fall, right? This goes.
They buried them for 2 months, but you look at how the story was leaked. A lot of people aren't paying attention to this. It didn't go to a Washington reporter. It went to a reporter in Chicago, right? And that's where the U.S. attorney, John Lausch, was looking at it. Who's John Lausch? John Lausch is one of 2 U.S. attorneys who was allowed to stay on after Trump. He was appointed by Trump. Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth started a campaign to keep Lausch on. What does that tell us? It tells us that Lausch is naturally a Democratic Party loyalist, right? He worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago all through the Obama years. This is all very carefully orchestrated. It's all been carefully done. And if you look, you see Obama's fingerprints all over this. And that's one of the reasons they're worried, because they had to make sure at a certain point they got in front of it in case that something really bad happened. Look, there's another thing going on here too. It's not just Hunter Biden. There's also National Archives, right? I suspect that that's what happened, that someone from the National Archives, as they started to zero in on Trump, someone from National Archives tipped them off and said, we may have a problem with Joe Biden here too. Just want to give you a heads up, so you should watch out. I think that it wasn't Biden lawyers looking through his office at Penn Biden Center. I think they had a tip from National Archives.
That does actually sound to me like a very plausible node here, a node of influence, because the idea that they use the National Archives as a resource for justifying a SWAT-like raid on Mar-a-Lago, that's bad tradecraft. That's dumb. The National Archive, they're not cut out for that, okay? So almost, because there's all kinds of stuff about and around the National Archive that is not secure, that is not behind walls, that is not really traditionally part of the deep state, in fact. And all of a sudden people, as you say, are going to look at that and start asking questions. And what you're saying then is the Hunter Biden stuff is definitely now out there, and the FBI has evidently committed to do some kind of investigation.
It's what the FBI specializes in with the Democrats is by and large performative investigations. And that's what's been going on with Hunter Biden for 2 years. I lose my mind every time I hear people say, yeah, Hunter Biden's under investigation. Hunter Biden is not under investigation. It's a fake investigation, right? There's no real Hunter Biden investigation that's been going on here. So we have to ask, well, what's going on? Why did they bring this Biden stuff, the Biden classified documents, public? And as I've said, they're worried about two things. They're worried about Hunter Biden, what Hunter Biden might do. He's a loose cannon, and he's in the middle. He's in the middle of the White House. That's number one. Number two is National Archives.
Does he literally come and go in the White House to this day?
No, I don't think he does, but he's at all the, again, he's got access to all of the president's living spaces in Delaware. And that's where Joe Biden is spending an awful lot of his time, right? He's at home. He's vacationing at home. The other, I strongly recommend, I know that ColemanNation is very busy, working hard, spending time with their families. But viewers, if you have a chance, strongly recommend you read the congressional report about Sandy Berger, the Bill Clinton National Security Advisor, who was taking documents out of the National Archives, right? The procedures have apparently been tightened at National Archives, but not that much. That I think that's a very important part of this story that's been missing. We all assume because CNN reported it. CNN, explained how Biden's last days in the office of the vice president, it was chaotic, and they're packing things here and packing things there. Well, it doesn't explain, though, how all these different documents went to all these different residences, and it went to the Penn Biden Center. Pretty sure that's not what happened. I think that there are other ways to look at this. And again, if you look at the report about Sandy Berger, you see what happened. There's even some of the same players.
And what didn't
Christopher
happen,
Wray, now head of the FBI, was part of the DOJ team that helped bury what Sandy Berger had been doing. So it's I think we need to go on precedent. We need to look more closely at that.
And finally, believe it or not, the time has whizzed by, as it does with us. You have a couple of times dropped coy little references to the Penn Biden Center. Fascinating what's coming out about the University of Pennsylvania and the Biden family, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, are you talking about the amount of China money that's going in there?
Yeah, evidently there, the basically Penn has apparently been used as a big washing machine for China money, Biden functionaries, and it happens to be that traditionally Penn was not one of the most woke colleges in the country, and now they're hanging out someone like Amy Wax to dry, because that's what the culture. Of course, this is happening at lots of traditionally more stolid universities around the country. I get that, but evidently this Penn Biden business is unbelievable. I mean, every institution has been compromised, and this goes back to what you were saying a couple of minutes ago about how we look at this era in American life.
Yeah,
and it's fun. It's interesting to me that you put it that way, because I myself have been thinking, as a student of history, an amateur student of history as I am, about how you look back on different eras. In other words, we simply have to, exactly as you said, come to terms with the fact that this is not the free country. This is not the constitutional republic that we thought we were growing up in. I understand that we may have been lied to about a lot, and almost certainly were, but they bothered to lie then. Yeah. Right? Going back to your earlier point, they're not bothering to lie now. And that's really scary, because that's the step before the Enabling Act, the emergency legislation, which we experimented with and which worked quite well during the COVID scare.
I mean, my take on this is that, and I've written about this before. It's not the end of America. It's the end of a branch of the ruling elite, right? These people are crazy. They've absolutely lost their minds. And look, I'm certainly not looking to excuse the Bidens, but you're talking about Chinese money coming to the University of Pennsylvania. I mean, that's true of virtually every America, especially the top universities in the country. And if you look at the number, and this brings us back to the FBI, in fact, if you look at the number of student visa holders from China, it's well over 300,000. It dipped a little bit during the COVID years, but now it's back up again. And the FBI should have a real counterintelligence mission, and that is to watch out for foreign espionage. But certainly the FBI can't cover 300,000 visa holders from the from the People's Republic of China. So who's responsible for that? Well, that's the political officials, right? Along with university administrators. It's like, guys, you can't let all of these students in here. Tom Cotton has made this case, Senator Cotton. Others have made the case as well. A lot of these folks are not here to study Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson,
or even civil engineering.
Yeah, that's not what's going on. They're studying, they're studying in STEM fields, which is another story entirely about how our elites sold out Americans on STEM education. But what the Bidens are doing, what Joe Biden is doing, what University of Pennsylvania is doing is across the board. Again, it's not an excuse for the Bidens. It's just an indication of how insanely corrupt this establishment, this political and corporate, academic, media and cultural establishment is. And my perspective is, or my thesis is, they're crazy. They're falling off a cliff. It doesn't mean the end of America. It means that they are coming to their own end, and they will continue to be extremely destructive, and it will get worse. But again, it's just the end of them. It's not the end of the country. It's not the end of us.
I think you're right. Lee, great talking to you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ron. And thank you, Coleman Nation.